50 Shades of.
As Loretta said, my name is Sara Grey. I'm the owner of Grey Editing LLC, which is in Philadelphia. And I've been editing about as long as I've been alive. I started in 3rd grade, but I've been doing it professionally for about 12 years. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the author-editor relationship and what you can expect from it and expect to get out of it. I work with individual authors as well as with publishing houses, mostly indies. And before I became a freelancer, I worked for a publisher that does business books and corporate training materials. So over the course of the years, doing editing in all sorts of different capacities, I've learned a few things about the care and feeding of authors. So I'm, and I'm a writer myself. I know how I like to be treated. And I also poll several of my authors today. I work with a big range of people. I've got scholars and business coaches. I've got a diplomat. And ask them how do they feel about being edited. So I'm going to do a little show of hands because I want to find out how you all feel about that. So how many people here have worked with a professional editor before? Lots of you. Excellent. Okay.
Would that be an editor at a publishing house?
Well, that's actually my next question was, were you paying the editor yourself?
No.
Yes.
A few of you. Okay. And the rest of you were going through the publisher. And how many of you were nervous about it the first time? Pretty much everybody. And how many of you were happy with the end result that you got? Pretty much everybody. Okay, great. Well, not everybody is excited about editing when they start out. In fact, most people, I think, are pretty nervous about it. You have a lot of fears and concerns because your book is your baby. And it's not always an easy process, but it can be a very smooth and a very productive one. And even when it's done right, very creative and intense and exciting. It can be a wonderful thing. And in the end, you will have a published book that's better than you could have imagined. I've heard people liken the process to when you come back to your hotel room in the afternoon and that the housekeeper has been there and they've like freshened it up and they put a mint on the pillow and folded your clothes and everything just feels nicer than it was when you left. And that's how I like for my clients to feel when they get their edited manuscript back. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about why you might work with an editor and how you might feel about it. And then I'm going to give you an editor's perspective on the process and some tips to help you make that relationship one that really supports your work and also helps you open up new markets for your writing. So the decision to work with an editor might or might not be up to you. It depends whether you're self-publishing, going through a traditional publisher, where you are in the process. If you're going through a traditional publisher, you're going to be assigned an editor. And you're probably not going to have a choice about it. No publisher, at least sometimes in the academic world, but for the most part, no publisher is going to put your work out into the world. But nobody's really going to put your work out there without a professional editorial eye. And so if you are the one making those decisions, you should think about that as well as you're going into self-publishing. Now, with a traditional publisher, you might be working with somebody in-house, or they might pair you with a freelancer. And that's where I come in. That's the sort of work that I do. And houses that use freelancers usually have sort of a stable of people that they like to work with, where they know that if they're going to work with this person, they're going to get a happy author and a quality product. And so that's actually how I've built my business as a freelancer, is by cultivating those relationships with those publishers. So if you're self-publishing, you have a decision to make about whether or not to hire a professional editor. And it is an investment. Now I'm going to shock you all by saying that I think you should hire a professional editor. And I'm going to tell you why. First of all, believe it or not, you are not the best judge of your own work. And, as a writer, I know how hard that is to swallow.
It's a humbling thought.
Yes, it is a humbling thought, but it's true. The editor, Michael Pryor, actually blogged about this pretty recently. I love what he had to say. He said, as the writer, you cannot be the reader. The very things that made you the writer, the knowledge of everything that went into the book and everything that didn't, means you cannot be the fresh, wide-eyed reader who has just simply picked this book up because the wonderfulness of your previous work, or because the cover had a picture of a cat on it, If you strain really hard, you can perhaps be aware of a potential reader's expectations or even their experience in reading your work, but you cannot really put yourself in their shoes. It takes someone else to do that. It takes an editor. And even going beyond that, after you've stared at your manuscript every day for 2 years, there's a sense of numbness that sort of creeps in. You're going to start missing things. So I think that's very important. Second of all, your mom is not an editor. I mean, in which, unless your mom actually is an editor, in which case, good for you. My daughter will be in good shape. But you can and should have friends and family look over your work. That's absolutely crucial and it's absolutely valuable. But if they're not professionals, they're going to miss things. They're not necessarily going to know what to look for. Their reactions as readers to the story, to the information, to the content itself is great. But don't count on them to catch inconsistencies in your tenses, problems with your APA formatting, an intrusion on the part of the narrator's voice. Those are all things that editors know to look for and are paid to catch, and they're long lists of things that we look for. We are professional noticers, as someone put it. But that's why editing is a profession. It requires training and experience and skill, just like performing surgery or wiring electricity. I mean, I wouldn't want an unpaid, inexpert friend wiring my house. If I'm going to pour my heart and soul into my book, I'm going to extend the same care to that book that I would to any other part of my life. Another reason to hire an editor is that we can help make your book much more sellable. There really is an investment in what you may be able to get out of your book. We're not marketers, and there are a lot of people here who can speak better to marketing than I can. But if you're trying to sell a manuscript to publishers, or if you're trying to sell your self-published book on the internet to readers, nobody wants a book that's full of typos and errors and kind of weird self-serving tangents and that sort of thing. Nobody wants a book that doesn't speak to its audience. Nobody wants a book that doesn't look professional, that doesn't look like it's put together by somebody who knows what they're doing. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But all of these are good reasons to hire an editor, and there are many, many more. But I hope by now that you're on board and that you're thinking about how best to get your book polished. So what I want to talk about first then is how to hire an editor. And a lot of people have questions about this. There's no certifying board. There's no official certificate that you get that says I'm a real editor. It's not like being an RN or something. So what you need to do is make sure that you're hiring a professional. Don't go straight for the lowest price. There are a lot of websites that offer very, very cheap editing. Sites like Elance and so on where you can hire a freelancer. When I first started freelancing, I would look at those and I'd say, how does anybody make a living working off of these sites? And the answer is, if you live in the US, you probably don't. You probably live in a country where the currency is much less compared to the dollar, and so you can actually make some money off of those prices. So what I'm saying is, you get what you pay for, and if your English work needs to be edited by a native English speaker, which it does, then you are not going to get quality editing from those sites. You are not going to find quality there. What you need to be looking for is somebody with experience and credentials. So like I said, there's no certifying body, but there are professional organizations that most professional editors are a part of. And those organizations have websites where you can actually go and look at people's profiles and view their resumes and see how much experience they have. The top two in the US, both of which I'm a member of, are the Editorial Freelancers Association, excuse me, which is the-efa.org, and the American Copy Editors Society, which is copydesk.org. The EFA also actually has a job list service where you can create a classified ad and send it out, and it's going to reach hundreds of editors who have been in the field for a long time. I was talking with someone in the back, and we were talking about how the competition there is actually stiff, because we're talking about people who have been in the field for many years. So this is a great way to get connected with people who know what they're doing. And once you've found some candidates, look at their websites. If an editor's website has a typo on it, don't even bother. Honestly, if they didn't put the work into their own project, they're not going to put the work into yours. So look for that straight off. Check out the projects that they've worked on. See if they have testimonials from happy clients. What you want to find out is, one, whether they're experienced, and two, whether they're experienced with the kind of work that you want to give them. So most editors are generalists by temperament. I thought about going to grad school, but I just couldn't bear the thought of specializing in one thing for that long. I love the fact that as an editor, I get to read all sorts of different fields and broad stuff. But all of us develop specialties as we go along, particularly fiction versus nonfiction versus poetry, and then specializations within that. For example, I specialize in the humanities. So I work with philosophy, I work with a lot of political theory, cultural theory, media studies, history, foreign policy. I love that sort of stuff.
Fiction? You do any fiction?
I do some fiction. I actually just finished working on the first novel that I've done, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But that stuff is my bread and butter. It's the bulk of what I do, and I do a lot of other things besides. I can and I will. I'll do everything from your website to your novel. But if you really want to be impressed by my background, if you work in that topic, that's where I can really pull out the big guns. So if you're coming to me with a field guide for bird watchers or a textbook on theoretical physics, I'm probably not the editor for you. You want to find somebody who's experienced in those fields, who's going to know the terminology that's used in those fields, who's going to have read other works on the subject, who's going to know what your readers are looking for when they come to your book. Because that's an editor who can help you. You want somebody who can stand in as a proxy for your reader. I feel like in a lot of ways I'm the reader's advocate. I'm standing in for the reader and saying, I'm putting myself into the shoes of your target demographic, and I don't understand this, so it needs a better explanation. Or I feel like you're explaining this too much, and it's a little bit condescending for somebody who already knows about this field. You want an editor who can say those things to you, because if you can reach those people, if you're talking to the right audience, you can reach them and you can move them and you can make them your fans. And that's absolutely key to what you're doing. So, all right, you found yourself an editor. Now we're going to start the editing process. I'm a big fan of a woman named Carol Fisher-Saller. She's one of the creators, or one of the people who work on the Chicago Manual of Style. She does the monthly Q&A on their website, which I highly recommend. It's very funny and smart. And she actually has a book called The Subversive Copy Editor, which I highly recommend. It has a chapter for writers about working with editors. And there's something that she says that stuck with me for many years, and that is to think of editing as a gift, not an insult. So let that sink in. Editing is a gift, not an insult. So how easy is it to think of editing as an insult?
Ego.
Right, you get your manuscript back and it's covered in reading. Maybe literally, maybe virtually. There's track changes everywhere. Your commas are moved, your semicolons are gone, there's whole sections cut out and moved around, comments, questions, and there's this long email that comes with it. Here's what I liked, here's what didn't work, here's some consistent issues with your writing that you need to address, here's some things that you really need to change to move forward. Right? And this is your baby. This book is yourself. You've labored on it and you've sweated over it until it's perfect. And this person's coming along and saying, no, it's not perfect. They want to mess with it, right? And they want you to give them money to mess with it. Right? How ridiculous is that? It makes people feel like they're back in school. And there's that mean old English teacher who picked on you for your grammar in front of everybody. People sort of go into that place of fear and humiliation, and you're telling me that I can't be a good writer, and that's absolutely not what we're there to do. Because here's the thing, your book is not perfect. Nobody's book is perfect. The greatest, most brilliant writers in the world who've got 30 books to their name, huge bestsellers, their books aren't perfect. They get those emails, right? They get those manuscripts that are dripping in red. All of them. Every single one of them. And the really good writers, the ones who really enjoy the writing process too, they learn to roll with that and to value that and embrace it and to make it part of their process. And actually, you hear about a lot of great writers who actually worked with the same editor for decades. And it becomes this collaborative partnership. And I've been lucky enough to build that with some of my authors. And it's really valuable. So you can have that. And it's not an insult, so take a deep breath. When you get that email, just make a cup of tea. And remember, this is not your mean old English teacher. We're here to help. And if you can get through it, your book is going to be so much better for it.